Second, that it seems to deal in absolutes, that it appears to want us to think of a God who is in some way or another a dictator in this world, and if this one should prove disappointing, I think you used the word dress rehearsal, the term dress rehearsal, a mere ante-room. If you think this is unfair, if you think this is discrepant, if you think this is irrational, why do the evil prosper? Why do the good get trampled underfoot and left behind? Never mind. Once you've squeezed with agony through the keyhole of death, there's another whole world where all that will be put right, where every tear will be dried and every injustice compensated, which, if it was true, would be a terrible exercise in sadomasochism. Why put a bunch of rats into a labyrinth of torture? See how they do, surprise them with new rules, even bigger surprise when you squeeze them through that last gap. Now we have you, and now you're due for a verdict against which there is no appeal. The incremental effort of a lot of steady work that some of us have been putting in to dispel illusions in the supernatural, and in a private belief that I've held for a long time, which is that very many of the practitioners of these faiths don't believe it either. And perhaps that might be the first consolation that we take away from this evening's discussion. My own task having been so much lightened, even though I retain the tiny suspicion, and I hope it's an ignoble one, that Rabbi Shmuley might possibly be going easy on me. And that would be a great cause of resentment. If I thought for a second that that was true, it's already bad enough that I'm the fifth person appearing on this stage, and you may have noticed the steady decline in the standard of pulchritude that went on after number 3 had left the stage. So I'm left to restate what I still want to say, and have to begin with a disagreement. The idea that a person who martyrs himself and kills others in the cause of the faith will be rewarded in paradise is not a delusion of Mohammedanites. I wish it was. It would be very nice if we could say that that was the case. It is rather a belief firmly rooted in the holy book of the Muslim faith, the Quran. It is believed by an enormous number of people. It may not be disbelieved that someone who martyrs himself for the faith will be so rewarded. To do that would be to challenge the authenticity of the book, and therefore cannot be done. The most that can be done is to say that somebody interpreted this mad instruction incorrectly, but we would be living in a very happy world indeed if this was just a delusion of one leader of a 19-man gang. The same, I think, can be said of, you'll correct me, I'm sure, Shmuley, if I'm mistaken, but I think it's number 13 of the Rambam's list of articles of faith, Maimonides' opinions of what it's necessary to believe in order to be of the faithful, that there will be a resurrection. It comes just after, I think, the belief that the Messiah will come. Though, because it's Maimonides, because it's the Rambam, he does say, though he may tarry, you may not doubt that he will come, nor may you doubt that you're due another life. Now, I'm sorry. I take this stuff very seriously because I have to deal with, as I do with the Christian version of it, put so creepily and so shadily, that we bury our dead, the Christian faith, of which I'm not a member, they bury their dead in what they call, in this slightly evasive way, the sure and certain hope of resurrection. Not the sureness and the certainty of, you notice. They haven't got the arrogance for that anymore, but the sure and certain hope of resurrection. These are the beliefs on which monotheism has based itself and upon which it continues to exert its extraordinary and lethal power. And I won't take your offer. Rabbi, I can't take it. I can't say all they're talking about is posthumous fame. All they're talking about is reputation. After all, people still read Shakespeare. Surely that proves that there's an afterlife. No, I'm sorry. It's a confusion of categories. It's not comparing like with like. It's not even non-overlapping magisterial. It's radically discrepant views of what reality is. And if religion would say, we don't promise you anything after death, that would be the end of it. And Shmuley would be talking ethical Judaism, and I would be saying, atheism is compatible with any belief you like. You can be an atheist and be a supporter of Ayn Rand, the most famous atheist in America. You can be an atheist and a nihilist. You can be an atheist and a fascist. All you have to do is say that you reject the supernatural dimension. But that's the most crucial thing. And now the critique of religion that we've evolved over the years in mortal combat with it is this, essentially. First, that it has a very queasy relationship with anything called evidence. That it makes very, very large claims for itself. Perhaps Rabbi Shmuley won't choose this evening to do so, but it claims to talk in terms of redemption, of salvation, and even of eternity. And there's an inverse relationship between what it claims and the amount of evidence that it can muster. And that this is its original, if you like, sin. Second, that it seems to deal in absolutes, that it appears to want us to think of a God who is in some way or another a dictator in this world, and if this one should prove disappointing, I think you used the word dress rehearsal, the term dress rehearsal, a mere ante-room. If you think this is unfair, if you think this is discrepant, if you think this is irrational, why do the evil prosper? Why do the good get trampled underfoot and left behind? Never mind. Once you've squeezed with agony through the keyhole of death, there's another whole world where all that will be put right, where every tear will be dried and every injustice compensated, which, if it was true, would be a terrible exercise in sadomasochism. And why put a bunch of rats into a labyrinth of torture? See how they do, surprise them with new rules, even bigger surprise when you squeeze them through that last gap. Now we have you, and now you're due for a verdict against which there is no appeal. If you don't believe in that as a scheme, you don't believe in God. You don't believe in the biblical promise of redemption and salvation, and you certainly don't believe in the resurrection. So I think Shmuley's word on that is that that's the case, is as good as anyone else's, and I'd say perhaps better than some. But I'm talking also to people who will be tuning into this broadcast later, and I have a captive audience, and so I've got a couple more points to make before I rest the case that you smoothed for me.
Religions promise resurrection and eternal life, but there's no evidence to support it. Science has been studying death for centuries, and every reliable study shows the same thing. When the brain dies, consciousness ends. Neuroscience confirms memory, identity, and awareness are tied to brain function. Once oxygen and blood flow stop, those processes shut down permanently. There has never been a documented reversal. Historically, claims of resurrection are rooted in tradition, not fact. Even the Bible is full of contradictions about it. Matthew 27:52-53 says saints rose from their graves when Jesus died, yet no other gospel or historian of that time mentions this extraordinary event. That silence is strong evidence it didn't happen. The Christian doctrine of the resurrection itself comes from Paul's letters, written decades after Jesus' death, not from eyewitness records. Hitchens is right. The larger the promise, the less evidence there is. And when Christians bury their dead in the sure and certain hope of resurrection, Book of Common Prayer, notice even the wording admits it's only hope, not certainty. Contrast that with what we know from science. Death is final. Religion offers eternal rewards, but it can't prove them.
That it's based on, there's another element in our critique of it, is that it's based on wishful as well as delusional thinking. Above all, wishful thinking. What is a stronger desire in the human species than that we shall conquer death? We are the only primates, as far as we know, we're the only members even of our own species, the primate species, who are fully aware of death and absolutely unreconciled to the idea of our own extinction. Even though we know our chemical composition, we know we are made out of the same elements as the rest of the cosmos. In fact, rather miraculously, if you want to call it that, we're even made out of stardust. Stars had to die for us to live, so we think it's overwhelmingly probable that when we die, our chemical ingredients will return to the natural biological and biochemical cycle, and there seems no evidence to the contrary. There may be animals who know how to fear death, but certainly no animals who know how to deny it. That's why it's so interesting that among the most frequently asked questions of people to their priests and mullahs and rabbis about the afterlife is, will my dog or cat be there too? And you notice they only ask that, will Timmy be in heaven or Rover? They never say, will that hellish tabby I once had be reassembled in the infernal regions? This is enough to show how wishful the thinking is. Now, I see that Shmuley has Dinesh's clever but, I think, thin book on the case for the afterlife in front of him. And in one debate that I had with Dinesh, he briefly gave me pause by saying, yes, wishful thinking for heaven, all right. That's hedonistic, that's a hope, that's a desire. But then why would people who were wish thinking, why would they want hell? Good point, and it tells against simple-minded Freudianism, as does a lot of other evidence. But not all of our wishes are completely transparent to us, I think, and not all of them are hedonistic, especially as they respect or regard other people. I was one of the 2 or 3 white people in the audience at Madison Square Garden in 1985 when Louis Farrakhan gave his famous address to a packed house of the Nation of Islam and addressed the Jews of the greater New York area in a taunting manner and reminded them, and I'll never forget it, he said, and remember, Jews, when God puts you in the ovens, it's forever. And I shall not soon forget the great moan and groan of pleasure that came from that audience at hearing that. And I should have been prepared for it, not just by the stupidity and nastiness and criminality on which this religious nutbag makes his living in this country. Call someone an imam or a priest or a reverend, there's nothing they can't get away with in our culture. If I could change one thing, it would be that. The second would be when someone gets up and says, I'm a person of faith, that they don't get respect for it. They think that's a respect-producing statement. I am a person of faith. You know, I'm a person who will believe practically anything on no evidence at all. Well, you said it, mister. Respect comes later. I digress. I shouldn't have been surprised by this orgy of sadism and cruelty and gloating from Farrakhan's religious audience, because I've read the Christian fathers. I've read Tertullian, who, answering some questions, one of the great fathers of the church, we see why hell is unpleasant. Why is heaven such fun? It seems to be rather dutiful. Endless praise, endless worship, endless subjection, endless tedium. You think that the Lord himself, after the first 5 billion years, would have had enough of the songs of praise. No, it's got to go on forever. Okay, where's the good bits? Tertullian says that we've thought of the good bits. In the intervals of that, you can go to the edge and you can go and look down and gloat on the torments and endless tortures of the damned. We've thought of that. Now, excuse me, that is a founding statement of Christianity. You can't disown it now. These churches wouldn't be here oppressing us. These mosques wouldn't be here incubating madmen and suicide bombers. There wouldn't be mad Jewish settlers on the West Bank thinking if we could only steal other people's land and bring on the Messiah and Armageddon, everything would be all right. There wouldn't be anything of this if it was left to the rabbi, and myself, but it's not. And Joseph Ratzinger, His Holiness the Pope, has just got off the plane in England today to announce that atheists are Nazis. An overdressed little ponce who was himself a member of the Hitler Youth dares to speak this way. He leaves the palace that quite rightly, Shmuley points out, was built on the sale of indulgences. Well, picture the church as if it had not done that. Are you talking about the same formidable multinational force? No, you're not. Have they disowned what they did? No, they haven't. Are there not still chantries all around the world where prayers are paid for and said for the souls of the dead so that there may be remission from sin, measured, by the way, in years and decades? Or, if you've paid a lot of money to a chantry, maybe centuries of remission from sin, as if the Gregorian calendar is used for matters of eternity and infinity. The pathos, the obviousness of this fraud still goes on, and Ratzinger himself is reinstituting the idea that by making donations to the church and regular appearances at its festivals, there may be an element of remission too. And only now is it being discussed that St. Augustine's vile idea that the souls of unbaptized children may not go to hell but go to an indefinite misery of limbo until the second coming may possibly not have been the way quite the tone of voice in which to speak to parents who'd lost their child. I'm not neutral about this. I don't think those statements are what they clearly are, man-made, silly, pathetic, mediocre, and erroneous. That is a job within the compass of anyone in this room or beyond. No, I go further. It's an evil doctrine. It's a wicked doctrine. It proceeds from people who want, quite wisely and quite shrewdly, real power over real human beings of a really absolutist sort in the only world we've got, which is the here and now. How smart they are to do it, how overdue we are to tell them that we reject this totalitarian interpretation of human life. Well, I'm not going to say why I don't think near-death experiences are impressive now. So you've spared me that, thank you. Though I wish someone would ask about them. And I think, excuse me, I think I've probably trespassed anyway on the allotted period of my time. But what I say is thanks for coming, and bring it on, and don't make me suspect that you're sparing me. Thank you.
Hitchens is right that belief in an afterlife is built on wishful thinking. Humans are the only species fully aware of their mortality, and psychology shows we create comforting myths to deny it. Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death, explains how cultures invent immortality stories to cope with fear. Neuroscience shows consciousness is a product of the brain, and when brain activity ends, awareness ends. There's no evidence of anything beyond. Even Christianity's picture of heaven and hell reflects human desires and fears, not reality. Early church fathers like Tertullian openly wrote that part of heaven's joy is watching the damned suffer in hell. That isn't love, it's sadism turned into doctrine. The Bible itself reinforces fear. In Matthew 25:46, Jesus says the wicked will face eternal punishment, while the righteous gain eternal life. But there's no evidence for either claim. Historically, the church monetized this fear with indulgences, literally selling forgiveness measured in years out of purgatory. That practice built St. Peter's Basilica. It's not divine truth, it's a financial racket. And science shows the opposite. When we die, our atoms return to nature. We are stardust, recycled into the universe.
All believe in it. The Talmud says that the patriarch Jacob did not die, because the Bible says he didn't die. It says Vayigva, he was elevated. So the Talmud says, Yaakov Avinu lo mes, our patriarch Jacob never died. And then it says, what do you mean he didn't die? It says he was buried. It says that Pharaoh led a giant procession with Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt, with so many kings who put their crowns on his coffin. He died. And the Talmud says no. Mazaro b'chaim, afu b'chaim. Because his children live in the example that he displayed. He has an afterlife through them. I see that with Christopher. I see it with Martin Luther King. I'm a white Jew, but his afterlife impacts me almost every day of my life, because he was the greatest American of the 20th century, because he restored us to the founding principles of this nation. And every time we want to move away from it, every time someone says something stupid and racist, stupid and too ethnic, stupid and prejudicial, we remember that he had a dream. And that dream wasn't just while he was a collection of swirling electrons and molecules. That dream transcended him, and it lives on in his afterlife. And it impacts upon us until this very day. I am not interested in heaven, and I couldn't give a damn about hell. If I'm destined to burn, then so be it. I don't want to be in some perfect place where I have nothing to contribute. In my religion and Judaism, when I go to a cemetery to pray at the graves of great people who represented a great idea so that I'm inspired by their vision, by their dream, by their message, I am obligated to tuck in my tzitzit. I am obligated to not perform any of the Torah's commandments in their presence. The reason? Because we're not jealous of them in heaven. They're jealous of us on earth. They want to do more good deeds. They want to practice more virtue. A perfect abode in heaven is one of the worst religious ideas, even as I affirm a full belief in it. Not that I can prove it. I can't. I cannot. It's a sheer matter of faith. I reject all the silly arguments that are often offered in the name of religion. Near-death experiences, bright lights hovering above your hospital bed. I even saw this cartoon. that said, it showed these surgeons who were operating on someone, and on top there was a giant sign that said, "If you can read this, you are dead." I reject near-death experiences. I don't believe they are scientifically acceptable. There's plenty of ways to explain it. Ouija boards, people who speak to the dead are all frauds to a man. I debated them on Larry King, all the people who speak to those in the afterlife, Sylvia Brown and John Edward and James Van Prague. We were on Larry King, and I said, "Larry, this is my yarmulke, and if one of these guys can get up right now and tell us when the next IED will explode in Iraq and Afghanistan, thereby saving the life of a brave American hero, because they can communicate with the dead, they see the future, I will put salt and pepper on this yarmulke and I will eat it right here on national TV."
Shmuley admits it outright. I affirm a full belief in the afterlife. Not that I can prove it. I can't. It's a sheer matter of faith. And that's the problem. No evidence, no data, just belief. Hitchens was right. The afterlife is built on wishful thinking. It's a projection of our fear of death and our desire to live forever. Psychology confirms this in terror management theory. Humans create stories about heaven, souls, and transcendence to reduce existential anxiety. Shmuley tries to dress it up by saying Judaism's afterlife is about legacy. Jacob lives on through his children. Martin Luther King lives on through his dream. But that's not supernatural survival. That's just memory, history, and culture. Neuroscience tells us consciousness dies with the brain. Martin Luther King's speeches endure because people preserve them, not because his soul floats in another realm. And when Shmuley points to Hitler, suggesting there must be an afterlife or justice isn't real, he misses the point. Creating a cosmic torture chamber doesn't solve evil. It's just vengeance projected into eternity. Justice is a human responsibility. Courts, law, accountability here and now. Adding a mythical afterlife doesn't punish Hitler. It just consoles the living. Even his dismissal of near-death experiences shows the inconsistency. He's right, they're not evidence. But that undercuts his entire case. If faith alone is the standard, then any delusion qualifies, including the very extremist distortions he condemns. You can't reject false afterlives without evidence and then claim your own version without evidence. In the end, Hitchens' critique stands. Religions exploit humanity's fear of death, sell false promises like indulgences, and hold power over people with doctrines of heaven and hell. The truth is simpler and far more beautiful. We are stardust, and when we die, our atoms return to the universe. Our legacy lives only in what we build, the love we give, and the knowledge we pass on. That's real, verifiable, and doesn't need wishful thinking. Outro. So what do you think? Is the afterlife nothing more than a human invention to soothe our fear of death? Or do you think Shmuley is right, that there's something beyond, even if it can't be proven? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of Hitchens versus Shmuley, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives, and share it with someone who loves big debates.